Now for our project today, if you have the printout, we'll be doing the 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. So you'll need crayons and scissors, or you can do a paper plate and color it in to look like a basket, and then you'll have your loaves of bread and fish, and you can have your basket of bread and fish. Or you can color the fish and bread on the paper plate itself and then color it in like a basket around it. And then another option you can add to it is string or old shoelaces. Just tape or glue it onto the back and you'll have your basket. So if you have your Bibles, please turn to Matthew chapter 14. And in verse 13, we will read, let me explain that just a few verses before, it talks about the death of John the Baptist. Now, John the Baptist and Jesus were cousins. So when we come to verse 13, when Jesus heard of it, the death of John the Baptist, he departed thence by ship into a desert place apart, likely to grieve or just be away for a time to mourn. And when the people had heard thereof, they followed him on foot out of the cities. Verse 14, and Jesus went forth and saw a great multitude, and was moved with compassion toward them, and he healed their sick. So Jesus had left to be alone, likely with his disciples, and the people heard about it, and they followed him. He healed their sick, though. He didn't turn them away. He looked at their need, and he continued to fulfill it. Now in verse 15, and when it was evening, his disciples came to him, saying, this is a desert place, and the time is now past. Send the multitude away, that they may go into the villages and buy themselves victuals. But Jesus said unto them, they need not depart, give ye them to eat. So the disciples saw that these people, sure, they needed healing, but they needed food too. And it was getting late. They feared that these people, perhaps some elderly or children, would have a hard time getting back home without food, without some strength to get back. But Jesus gave them the responsibility to take care of these people, to fulfill that need. And they say unto him, we have here but 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And he said, bring them hither to me. Now in John chapter 6, verse 9, it says that a young boy actually had the bread and fish, and the disciples then brought that to Jesus. So think of that. Out of all these people, 5,000 at least, one young boy who brought his lunch, he had the common sense to grab some fish and bread, or maybe he just had this food with him and he decided to follow the crowd. He was the only one who prepared, who had a lunch, and he was willing to give it to Jesus, to do his will, to feed these people. It was an impossible task. The boy could have gone around and given a little bit to 5 different people, and it still wouldn't be enough to fill them. But he gave it up to Jesus willingly for this impossible task. And the disciples, they brought it to Jesus. And in verse 19 we read, and he commanded the multitudes to sit down on the grass, and took the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, and looking up to heaven, he blessed, and brake, and gave the loaves to his disciples, and the disciples to the multitude. And they did all eat, and were filled. And they took up of the fragments that remained 12 baskets full. And they that had eaten were about 5,000 men, beside women and children. So somehow, Jesus took the bread and the fish. He prayed, he gave a blessing, and then he turned it back to the disciples. From himself, he gave to the disciples to then give to the people. The disciples gave Jesus everything they had, and Jesus in turn gave them to return to the people, to give out to all the people. Out of their combined resources, the disciples did not have enough to feed these people. But out of their willingness, out of what they had to give to Jesus, offering it all, Jesus performed a miracle and fed all the people that needed it, all 5,000 from one little basket. Now, I have an experiment to do, so we're actually going to go and change rooms, and I'll meet you there. Welcome to my kitchen. So you can follow along with this experiment at home. All you need is clear glass. Now, just to make sure, when you have a glass of water and you pour it out, the water pours. Now, I have with me, you may have seen this experiment before, but I have this little piece of paper. Now, paper versus water usually does not work. You can't make a paper boat. But somehow, this is going to keep the water from spilling out. Aha! That's working pretty well. If you're careful with it, you can make it last a little while. So that little piece of paper is holding the water back. Isn't it interesting how even just a little thing can do something amazing? Let's go back and finish our lesson. Well, that was fun. So from the piece of paper that we saw, we just needed a tiny piece of paper. It wasn't much, but that's all we needed to hold the water in, to perform such an impossible task. All Jesus asks of us is just our time, just our obedience, our willingness to sacrifice and give of ourselves to Him. We may not get 12 baskets full in return, but we will be blessed. Even if we're not blessed, or if we don't experience joy, which I hope you would, there will be blessings in heaven afterwards. When we go to heaven, there will be rewards and blessings. So for today, I want you to remember that giving everything you have, even though it is insignificant compared to God, He can use it to do miraculous and amazing things.